All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. So the deadline for the 53-man roster is Tuesday at 4 o'clock. Should be a crazy time, right? Who makes the roster? What's going on with the practice squad? Any big-name players getting released elsewhere? Any late-round or even mid-round picks that aren't making their respected teams? Now, all of a sudden, they're out in the open market, and they could be claimed by the Jets. Now, unfortunately, the Jets are not pretty high up in the waiver order claim. They're right around the middle of the pack. So teams up at the top, like the Chicago Bears, are going to have the first crack at all those players. But in any case, let's talk about this 53-man roster. This is my prediction. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. I'm curious to see. I feel like, really, for the most part, we know who's going to be making the 90% of the roster. It's just those fringe positions. It's just answering a couple question marks. What route would the Jets prefer to go down? So with that being said, let's talk about quarterback first. I have two QBs making the roster, Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson. I'm not thinking Tim Boyle makes the roster. In the event that the Jets cut him, I don't see a situation where he's claimed by another team. I feel like he'll just get put on the practice squad, and the Jets will roll, officially with two dressed quarterbacks on game day, and then Boyle will be a practice squad guy. Next up, we got running back here. I'm going Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook, Michael Carter, and Izzy Abanikanda. Unfortunately, I just don't think Bam Knight did enough this offseason in the preseason games, with the understanding that the running back room is loaded, right? It's not like Bam is going to be the team's number one back. It's not like he's going to be the number two back. So he's fighting for that third spot. Izzy was just drafted by Joe Douglas. Is he just going to outright cut a draft pick who is healthy, who's, at times showed some pop? Probably not. Joe Douglas made that draft pick before Dalvin Cook even entered the building, right? So I just don't see Izzy being released, right? It just doesn't make too much sense for me. And then, of course, Michael Carter. Really, that's the main question here. Michael Carter or Bam Knight. And I think based off of what we've seen from the Jets and how they've rolled out the running back depth chart so far, how these guys have played in preseason, I think Michael Carter is a safe bet to make the team. Okay, next up, tight end, we're going Tyler Conklin, CJ Uzomah, Jeremy Ruckert, and then Nick Bodden. And with Bodden, of course, this is kind of the elephant in the room here. This is the name that stands out. Bodden obviously gives you that flexibility at fullback, and I know it's 2023. I know nobody wants to talk about fullback. I know it's not the most, sexy position out there. It's not the most talked about. I completely understand it, but what Nick Bodden gives you is an extra package. He gives you an extra layer to the offense. Those fourth and goals, those fourth and inches, third and shorts, right? I formation types of things. Nick Bodden, when you just look at the rest of the roster, the rest of the 90 guys on the roster, Nick Bodden is the best fullback on the team. And despite it being such a small role within the grand scheme of the offense, it's still a role nonetheless that nobody else can really fulfill outside of Nick. So I think for that reason, you have two veteran tight ends in Conklin and Uzomah, two guys with playoff experience as well. And then you have your young guy in Jeremy Ruckert here. And then in that fourth category, it's Nick Bodden, who, again, fullback, can maybe play some tight end in an emergency situation, in an actual regular season game. So I think with tight end, I feel good about it. Now, looking at offensive line, we're going to talk about the starting five first from left to right. We're going Dwayne Brown, Laken Tomlinson, Connor McGovern, AVT, Mekhi Becton. Behind those guys, we got Billy Turner, Max Mitchell, Joe Tippmann, and Wes Schweitzer. Now, the name that's not on the list is Carter Warren, who was a fourth-round draft pick made by Joe Douglas this season, but he's going to start the year on IR, it's looking like. So it's a bit weird here. Yes, this is technically the final 53-man roster, but I could see literally after 1 week some roster moves being changed. And also potentially what's going on with waiver claims, right? If Joe Douglas likes a player, or the coaching staff likes a player that was just released somewhere else, I could see maybe somebody that's currently on the 53 get booted off, try to take them and put them on the practice squad, and then elevate the player that they just claimed. I believe we saw that happen last season as well. So with this case, we're rolling with the 9 offensive linemen. Typically, I would like 10, but again, with Carter Warren being on IR, I feel like the Jets are probably in IR to start the season. It would be different if it's week 10, week 11, but because we're starting the year out, we're going into week 1, and everybody on the O-line right now is healthy, I think we'll probably roll with 9 and then take that 10th offensive lineman spot and maybe put it in a skill position, which is what we're going to talk about now, wide receiver, where we're going Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, Xavier Gipson, Jason Brownlee, and Alex Erickson. And the top 4 guys are obviously making the team, but the last 3 that made it in, I think first off, we have to talk about the Corey Davis retirement. That, I know Rich Cimini said that it didn't really come as like a major shock, but I was shocked by it. A lot of people were shocked by it. And because of that, we now have an extra roster spot. No move has been made unless something happens like right this second. But I think for the time being, the Jets are just going to promote one of these extra younger wide receivers to the squad. And we look at Xavier. I think he was probably going to make the team outright. He gives you that special teams help, right? You look at what he was able to do in the last preseason game. It needed to be a strong showing. He went out and showed out, right? Led the team in catches with 7 and yards, I believe at 79. I mean, he looked really, really good. And he's, again, flashed with punt returns. So I feel like Gipson carved out a role, for himself with this roster. And then that extra spot, I'm giving it to Jason Brownlee just because of the potential. I like him a lot, and I also feel like he showed enough throughout camp and preseason to where if the Jets do waive him, he could get claimed by another team, especially one of these teams that really need help at wide receiver. There was a lot of talk that Brownlee should have been drafted, a lot of question marks to, like why wasn't he a draft pick, kind of one of those guys that slipped through the cracks. So, based off of what I've seen so far, I just don't feel comfortable outright releasing him and then just crossing our fingers hoping he makes the practice squad here. So, Brownlee. And then last but not least, Alex Erickson, a veteran wide receiver at this point, somebody who's made an instant impact. I feel like every single time he gets in the game, he comes down with catches, he gets open. He had a nice game yesterday, against the Giants here. But this is that extra spot, right? That I feel like once Carter Warren comes back, we're probably going to take away a wide receiver. But again, given that it's week 1, I think prefer to have an extra weapon on the team as opposed to the 10th offensive lineman on the depth chart, based off of like game planning purposes. Okay, so shifting gears and talking about the defense, let's look at the D-line. We're going Carl Lawson, although he might start the season on IR. Like, that whole situation is completely up in the air. I have no clue what's going on. But anyway, Carl Lawson, Quinton Williams, Quentin Jefferson, Jermaine Johnson, Bryce Huff, Will McDonald, Al Woods, Michael Clemens, Solomon Thomas, and John Franklin Myers. I feel great about the D-line, right? Outside of the Lawson situation, if he can't go, I still feel like the Jets are going to have one of the best defensive lines in all of football. It's just pass rushers all over the place, from the inside, from the outside. They got youth, they have veterans, they have star players. It also seems like the entire defensive line is hungry for a championship. It's hungry to be the number 1 defensive line in football. So I'm excited. I really cannot wait to see the overall production from this line. Next up, linebacker. We're going 4 players here: CJ Mosley, Quincy Williams, Jamian Sherwood, and Zaire Barnes. I think Chaz Surratt has had a nice preseason, but I do feel like he's going to be the guy that, because Barnes was a draft pick just a couple months ago, they're going to hope that Surratt makes the practice squad. At safety, we're going Jordan Whitehead, Tony Adams, Adrian Amos, and Trey Dean. That last safety spot is up in the air. I've seen some people suggest Davis. I've seen some people suggest Trey Dean here, which is the route I'm going down. And also I've seen people project 5 safeties, which is totally cool. But I think for me right now, Trey Dean gives you more of an upside compared to Ashton Davis. I feel like we've seen a lot of what, I don't want to say Davis has reached his ceiling, but I do kind of feel as though I just can't see Ashton Davis getting a ton better over time, whether it's regular season reps. Like, I feel like he's kind of tapped out in that regard. Whereas with Trey Dean, it's a bit of an unknown. And you factor in what he's looked like in the preseason. What does he have? 19 solo tackles? That's crazy. That is crazy to me. Also, factoring in that he's not even out there the entire game. So it's 19 solo tackles in limited action in the preseason. Yeah, I think Trey Dean definitely deserves a shot. Like, if you come in as an undrafted free agent, you stick around, you're making a name for yourself, you're making plays in camp, you're making tons of plays in preseason, you're getting tons of tackles at the safety position in limited action. Like, I don't really know, like, if Trey Dean doesn't make the team, I don't really know what more realistically he could have done to make the team, if that makes sense. What, 3-4 interceptions? Or that's where it just gets a little, unrealistic to me. So yeah, I'm rolling with those 4. Okay, so next up at cornerback here, this one is a little weird, all right, because we have to factor in that Brandon Echols is suspended for week 1, so he's not technically going to be on the 53. The Jets will have that open roster spot that they will have to fill. And Jarek Bernard-Converse, 6th round pick from Oklahoma State and LSU, a prospect that I was actually really excited to see in the preseason. He's been hurt. He's, I believe, on the PUP list right now. He's dealing with a lower body injury, but I just can't see a situation where Joe Douglas, where Robert Saleh, they outright cut a guy who they just drafted a couple months ago, and it's not due to his play. It's not because he's behind. It's not because he's not picking up the system or anything like that. It's literally because from day one, he's been in a boot. This was something where it's like, okay, maybe, I don't know if something happened before his time with the Jets, and that's when it started, but I do know literally day one of the practice, of open media practices, he was in a boot. So obviously he hasn't had that much time. But either way, he's technically speaking not going to be on the 53 to start out the season. So with that said, cornerback, I'm going Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, Michael Carter, Jimmy Moreland, and Bryce Hall. And I do feel like Bryce Hall is probably the last. He's going to be the player that gets swapped with Brandon Echols when he comes back. I think Jimmy Moreland's probably the name that stands out here, but he has a lot of experience given his age, obviously spending a couple seasons with Washington. And also, we take a look at what he's done in the preseason. I mean, again, if we're talking about a true, realistic competition here, and it's not like a predetermined battle where the coaches already know who's going to be making the team, if they gave Moreland a fair shot, to me, he deserves it. He was more impressive over Bryce Hall. He was more impressive from top to bottom over Echols as well. What did he have? 15 total tackles, 1 interception, 3 passes defended against in limited time at corner. I mean, if you give Sauce Gardner those numbers through the first, 2-3 weeks of the season, you're like, yes, Sauce Gardner's on great. He's on a great pace so far. So I like that, and then you get that added benefit of him actually having some regular season experience in years prior. So I do feel like Moreland should make this roster. If it was up to me, he should be he should be on it. And then last but not least, for special teams, we have Thomas Morstead, Greg Zuerlein, Thomas Hennessy, and Justin Hardy. So that's going to round it out for me. And again, it is going to be a bit weird because there's going to be shakeups literally after that first week. When Echols comes back, what's his role with the team? When does Converse come off the PUP list? Carter Warren, IR, that whole situation. So again, it's the final 53, but things are going to be changing I don't want to say almost immediately after it comes out, but I could see things changing very quickly. So anyway, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, go Jets.